Let's learn John Donne's poem, Death Be Not Proud. In the earlier video, you have recited the text and you have learnt the difficult meaning. Today, we go again about the appreciation of the poem. First of all, we should know about the poet John Donne because it will give us somewhat understanding about the way the poet writes, and that way we can also understand the poems. So John Donne was a wealthy merchant's son, and he studied at Oxford and Cambridge universities. He had a high post, but his secret marriage created disturbances and was relieved later on. Being a highly intellectual fellow, he served to the king and became a divinity lecturer. But troubles never set him at peace. Because of illness, he died at his daughter's house. Pseudo martyr and the progress of the soul, an anatomy of the world, an elegy, and epithalamium are his known works. He broke the Petrarchan tradition and began a new era in the history of English lyric as well as religious verse, which made him a great poet. He is a pioneer of metaphysical school. There's a blend of passion and argument, simplicity and complexity into his holy and love sonnets and in another songs. So this is what about John Donne. Now we go the particular tradition in which John Donne wrote. Actually, he started the tradition which we call as metaphysical poetry. So let us learn what is it. In the beginning of 17th century, a new type of poetry began to appear. Love to God and sex were chief subjects. Look, this is the contrasting things. The poetry was intellectual, and that is how it is different than the Elizabethan lyrics. It was difficult because of strange images and comparison, conceit and conventional style, sudden beginning, etc. are other aspects. You should remember these important aspects to analyze or to appreciate any of the metaphysical poetry. John Donne and some other poets followed this tradition. They were called poets of metaphysical school. So this is about the metaphysical school of poetry. Now we go to the analysis of the poem, that is Death Be Not Proud. When we want to understand any poem, first of all we should know what is the theme. So here it is the matter that what we understand by the particular poem, what is the central idea of the poem. It is addressed to death because it is the title and the first line makes it very clear. Death is not a human being, but the poet has imagined it as a man. So death is personified and abstract thing is changed into a concrete one. We know that we cannot see death, but here the poet has imagined death as a person and is talking to that person. So that is how it is a personified abstract thing is made concrete thing. The poet isn't afraid of death. He says that death should not be proud of himself because he will die too. So that is how the poet's spirit to challenge the death can be seen in this poem. Now we go to the content of the poem. Death is mighty and dreadful. Some people called him so. Death kills everybody. No one can escape from his hands. Picture of death is horrible. all wants to escape from the pain of death. So it is dreadful. But the poet doesn't believe death as mighty and dreadful. He asks death not to be proud, as many people have defeated him. He cannot kill them. The poet also says him that he means death would not be able to kill him. The poet makes the death a poor fellow. So in the beginning of the poem, the poet addresses death and he says that death is not mighty and powerful as people call, but death will himself be a poor fellow. Uh, Death will not be able to kill any person, rather, death will die. So, that is how the poet bedeems the stature of death. He says, rest and sleep are pictures of death. We can imagine anything through pictures. Rest and sleep are temporary. They give pleasure in death too. There is sleep. The soul of the person goes to another world. He wakes up again. So the pictures are not horrible. The death has to take help from others. He is not independent. He depends upon fate, chance, kings, and desperate men. Moreover, he requires support from other things. Poison, war, and sickness are such things. With all these things, death enables himself to kill others. So here in this stanza, the poet says that what sort of death can be, we can understand seeing the pictures. So here what the pictures are? Rest and sleep. And then death is independent, not independent, but has to take help of other things. For example, death always depends upon fate, chance, kings. Moreover, he requires some help from poison and other matters. Hence, death cannot be considered powerful or mighty. The poet continues, to die is painful. People imagine death as a horrible thing. When a man dies, he sleeps. But no one welcomes death happily. Poppy and charms are other options. They make us sleep. There is no pain. The effect of them is gentle and painless. So the poet considered them as better options. Because traditionally we have heard that death is horrible. It can scare anybody. Fear grips the person. But rest we don't afraid of taking. Similarly, we are not afraid of sleeping. It means rest and sleep, they are painless. And that is how the poet makes the argument that even death cannot be painful. It must be very easy to die. The poet continues, and now we come to the end of the poem. The end of the sonnet would be always dramatic. And here it is also an excellent end. The death is referred as a sleep. In the religion, it is believed that a man comes out from the sleep after some hours. Similarly, death takes us into the eternal world. A man finds new life. So death is medium for another life. When there is another life, death remains helpless. He finds enables to kill him, efforts are vain. So death cannot kill, his efforts are vain. He finds himself unable to kill. His efforts are not useful as he considers. And while in doing so, the poet says that the death himself would die. And that is how the end shows victory over death. So the content of the poem is remarkable. The poet has made wonderful arguments against death. Now we go to the other aspects of the poem, and the poet has made some uses, devices to make the arguments, and that is how the poem becomes rich. And especially in metaphysical poetry, metaphors are very useful, and let us see how they are helpful in this poem. Here death is considered as a human being, so it is the first metaphor, and it is done through personification. Then rest and sleep are other metaphors. The death is also called slave. It is another metaphor. Death has been compared with sleep. So that is how it is the last metaphor. So nearly 4 to 5 metaphors have been used, and with the help of them we can understand how a particular abstract thing can be made concrete. Now the poem is also remarkable for its paradox. Let us see. So paradox always shows opposite nature of an object, and we expect normal characteristics from a particular object. For example, wax should melt down and iron should not. This is a common thing. But iron melts down and wax doesn't. So this is paradox. If this is indicated, then we come to know it is a paradox. Here, death should not die. Death takes away life. That is common thing. But here, what is the paradox? The poet says that death shall die. So that is how the paradox in the poem makes the emotion a very strong one, richer one. Now we go to another aspect of the poem, and that is a remarkable use of adjectives. And adjectives are always helpful to describe particular objects. They describe, they make the particular object strong. So here, especially, the degree of appreciation changes accordingly, and in this poem Donne has used many adjectives. That way he describes death, and we come to know how strong or mighty or powerful death can be. So these are the some adjectives: mighty, dreadful. They are used for death, and again poor. The adjective used for death, poor death, and says that you are slave. So that is how death is considered. Generally the opposite words for death are thought by anybody, but the poet here gives us another side of death. And in the poem, after the use of adjectives, other elements also we should see, and especially here you will find lot of negative remarks about the death. So let us see what words or phrases or statements the poet has used, and that way they have supported the argument which Donne is making, or the point he is making. For example, be not proud, thou art not so, die not poor death, nor yet canst thou kill me, death shall be no more. So these are the arguments that the poet makes, and they suggest the poet's clear-cut belief about death. Donne is successful in making death as poor and weak. It seems that he is relentless to death. Now, in the poem, if we go through deeply, if we pay attention, then particular words will draw your attention, and they are archaic words. Archaic words are always related to old language. The Bible and holy books have such kind of a language. They have a special purpose. Why a poet uses such kind of words? He has special purpose. And what is that purpose? They take us into the past. It creates an effect of remoteness. All these purposes are here in using such words. So in the poem you will find words like differently, especially pronouns thee, thou, thy, and there are some verbs and auxiliary verbs: art, doth, canst, uh, shalt, dost. These are the certain words, and some other words: soonest, thinkest. Moreover, some words like slave, fate, kings, war, poppy, charms, eternally, these words also contribute to create an effect of past. These words of elision, thinkest, thou art, swellest, are also part of the style. So that is how we are pushed into the past through such kind of words. Now we go to rhyme and rhythm of the poem. Through sounds, poetry becomes sweet. There are many things which help to build musical atmosphere. They are assonance and consonance. Repetition of any sound called alliteration, and especially consonant repetition is called consonance. There are many examples in the poem. For example, in the first stanza of the poem has alliteration of la, da, da, th, the. These are the certain consonants or assonance you will find. A repetition of vowel sounds is also known as assonance. So here you have to pay attention to repetition of vowels. The poem is full of various vowel sounds. For example, a, o, e, e, and there are many other such vowels. And through that repetition of consonants and vowels, when we recite them, will create a kind of music, a kind of effect that comes into our mind. Our ears would be drifted towards those sounds, and that is how rhythm is created. And now we go through the rhyme scheme, and especially it is a sonnet. So let us see how the poet has devised the poem. So here you will find the rhyme scheme of ABBA, means first line and fourth line, second line and third line, they are repeated. So that is the first stanza and the second stanza, 8 lines stanza, ABBA, and then CD and EE. So that is how the octave line, octave stanza, and then sestet stanza, they are given here. No doubt that is not the particular way of a rhyme scheme, but John Donne has changed it, and that is how he is different from Elizabethan sonnets, or you can say Shakespearean sonnet style. It should have actually CDC, Italian one, but John Donne has violated it, and that is how the poem is very beautiful one, and it is one that gives a reputation to Donne as a sonneteer also. Anybody, one who is interested in metaphysical poetry, would love it. So I think this is how the poem has been analyzed. You see the important aspect of the poem. Thank you very much.